Hello, everybody. So looks like we made it to the end of the semester. Thank you all for coming to class today. I wanted to end, it'll be a short class, but I wanted to end with something that I think will be very useful for everybody. A great place to apply the stuff we've studied in this class, and just an all-around useful place where scripting shows up in small doses that you may not have realized was there, but can be incredibly powerful. Let's see, what's a good way to introduce this? I did remember to grab the computer from my office because, well, need to have Microsoft Office on here, and that's a big piece of software. Been around for many decades now, probably longer than a number of y'all have been alive. So Office has been around your entire life. So it's a piece of software. People sat down and wrote up a bunch of scripts and programming instructions to set all those things up. And it's open where we can add stuff in. So I thought that would make a nice, good closing point here, is looking at some of that stuff. And it's not just that. Pretty much all of our software includes places where we by far the vast majority of software includes places where we can do plugins or add-ons or different names for them, but we can write our own little custom features when we need them. It can be really useful. I was thinking we'd look at it in Office because that's a good standard one. Once again, kind of got to go with the majority and go with Microsoft Office, but LibreOffice, that's the one I really like to use. The one Apache's current version of open source Office software, which is another thing. Some software, open source, now that you all have been through a little bit of programming, open source takes on a new meaning because it's not just the free cost of it. Open source means the source code's open. So instead of just installing that software like you're used to, now that y'all know how to program, you can download that source code and customize it to fit your needs and get a lot more capabilities. But even open source stuff also includes plugins, so that seemed like a good thing to look at today. A very useful thing to wrap up our semester.
With LibreOffice Calc, and I'll let you know how well I do following along on it.
Okay. On LibreOffice, LibreOffice does take VBA, the same language that we were going to look at here.
Sweet.
Yeah, so I'll start with the language. I wasn't going to open Raptor today, but there's a place to point out here. So we saw in the flowcharts, after we did our flowchart, we can generate some code. One of those options being VBA. And what that stands for is Visual Basic for Applications. So when they wrote Microsoft Office, I don't know why I shared my screen here. I meant to share the screen on the other computer. So that language is the one that we write plugins for in Microsoft Office. In the early days of Office, it was created with Visual Basic. It's a programming language, goes all the way back to the 60s. Oh, I should let this computer bring my other computer into the meeting so I can share my screen. Don't join audio. There we go. So some of y'all may have encountered this before, because for several decades, one of the most popular ways to introduce programming to people getting started was with a software called Visual Studio, put out by Microsoft, and using a language called Visual Basic. It's a very large language. It goes back to the 60s. The original one was created in 1962 by an instructor because it was so hard to get started into programming at that time. You had to have a whole lot of high-level math classes and a whole lot of electrical engineering and all of that just to get to started programming. So he created this language BASIC, and like so many things in IT, that's an acronym, and the B stood for beginner. So it was by design created by a college professor to make it easier to start students into programming. So it's a very easy language to work with. It went through a lot of iterations, was very popular for a long time. And Microsoft, as they were coming up and GUIs were just taking the place of all the console inputs, and this would have been the late 1980s, early 1990s, like late 1980s, like 1989 at the earliest. Microsoft got a hold of this language and kind of customized it with some graphical qualities and created Visual Basic with a lot of those easy to start with features, things that were set up to work to introduce new people to programming. So it's an easy language to work with. They started making their software with Visual Basic. The original Office was, but then around 2000, they invented C#, and I don't know, about 2008, 2009, they started migrating the original source code over to the newer language. So it's kind of a mix these days, but C# is really hard to work with. So they kept the plugins in the original VBA, and it's a very popular one. LibreOffice, that's Apache's current open source version, it's written in Python, so you can do your scripts in Python there, or several other languages, one of them being VBA. Autodesk, all of their software takes VBA. Lots and lots of software use that for programming languages, or for programming plugins. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen on this other machine here, and we'll kind of look at this. I assume everybody's familiar with Microsoft Office. That's been around for a long time, a very popular software. Oh yeah, I'll just go in Word. We have the same features for all of them, but the little example I put together, it made sense in my mind to do it in Word. So I'm just going to create a new document here. And just to be prepared, I'm going to pull up the example from when I was getting ready on this other screen, so I can, in case I need to look at it.
So for coding or programming, what can you use Microsoft Word for?
Oh, so this is extra things in Microsoft Word. So that's a great question, Keegan, because I was just trying to come up with a good way to do this. So we're not going to use Microsoft Word to code. What you want to do is push Alt F11.
But you can use Microsoft Word as a reference for whatever you're doing, right? Like you can just like practice on Microsoft Word, right?
Like typing words and stuff.
Yeah, typing words and practice.
Yeah, but Microsoft Word wouldn't recognize the language, and the words in a document are different than the text we put into a programming.
Yeah.
So I guess the only thing there is it's a place to type, but it wouldn't be a useful place to type.
Yeah.
So for writing programs, there's this extra thing. If you just push Alt F11, alternatively, if you're on something else following along, you might have to go to wherever macros are, which is under references, right? Nope. Oh, not that one. Oh, under the View tab on Microsoft Word, there's a place to record macros, just the automated process, or
Found other tools on LibreOffice.
yes, I can't remember where it was on LibreOffice, even as many times as I've used it. So however you can get to it on Microsoft Office, on all of the Office applications, so Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Access, you can just push Alt F11 and get to this little scripting thing. Has anybody ever used Visual Studio? Did you all see that in high school or previous classes?
Oh well, by the way, I'm not like, remember I said like or you said that you can't program on Microsoft Word, but could use Microsoft Word as instructions on how to do certain coding and
Like,
programming.
oh,
Like,
like looking at the source code?
yeah, looking at source code and just
Not
having
on
it record as
not on
instructions,
Microsoft's.
like
They're not open source.
instructions.
They're all we have is the compiled versions. There are other versions that you could get to the source code, but not for Microsoft stuff.
Okay.
Sorry, I misunderstood what your question is. That is a great use for free for open source software. If you go look for like open source office software, LibreOffice is the most popular one right now. You can just get to the source code and then look at that for
Okay.
how to do it. Sorry, I misunderstood your question, Keegan. I thought you were talking about like typing the document.
Yeah, not type in the document, but in terms of just maybe if you like have a document that has instructions on it, like maybe it could like, go through. And plus, remember how you did the screenshots for the Internet of Things lab?
Uh-huh.
So it's something along the lines of that, like do something like that where it's like gives you clear instructions on how to
Oh,
do
okay.
something. That's what
Okay.
I meant. That's what I meant.
Okay, yeah, just a document. So we were going to walk through this, and I will send out the notes from when I was getting ready. That way they're already typed up. I was kind of planning on doing that, the step-by-step thing that we're getting ready to walk through. So you can use this as a reference, because obviously we don't have time to look at everything. I was just gonna, really barely a step beyond letting you know this exists and how to take it further. So I was also gonna point you towards some good reference material for learning this stuff. There's always stuff like this. I prefer Google Docs. The plugins there or add-ons there are coded in ActionScript, which is essentially a customized version of JavaScript. For Mac users, if you're on Pages, you can write stuff in AppleScript. So lots of different ones. They've been trying to get Python into Microsoft Office, and it kind of works. It's still a little glitchy. The reason being that Microsoft Office, VBA, the one that is designed for the plugins to work with, and what it was coded in is a strictly typed language. And so going the other way, if we were in an open type language like Python, if we started in a strictly typed language and converted that into an open type language like Python, that's no problem, because then we just ignore the types that we have. We can ignore where we have to explicitly say we have an integer or explicitly say that this data is a string. But going the other way, when we have an open type language like Python and trying to turn it into a strictly typed language can be problematic, because we have to figure out what the type is. And as you all are well aware with Python, our type can change back and forth dynamically, which causes big problems. Strictly typed languages, we cannot do that. Strictly typed languages will always run faster because the computer doesn't have to waste time trying to figure out what type we have. So as we look here in Microsoft Word or PowerPoint or Excel, any of them, just push Alt F11 to get this place right code, or there will be a similar thing in any of your any Office software that you want to use. And a lot of times for using these for work, there's going to be a lot of repetitive tasks, things that we do over and over and over again, that it's nice to
Plus
automate the process.
and plus, with some job sites, requires to write reports to know what took place, like on what time and how you
Yes, little things like that. So this is a perfect thing for that.
Yeah, just like writing reports and just
or reports
going over
all
the
of your
days.
stuff is gonna all your essays and things are gonna have those formatting rules, like MLA or APA or something like that. And
But
nice to have that automated.
Yeah, but in terms of just like work and everything, with some jobs, they require reports, like written reports, for certain things that have like what you did and how you did it and what problem solving techniques you used to,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
there's a lot of stuff. Everyone's different. And actually that can be a very profitable thing. I've done that a few times, just automate a report. So the average worker just puts stuff in a database and then grab stuff from the database and write that up into a document automatically.
exactly.
Can be a useful thing. So let's take a quick look at this, and depending on how long it takes us to get through it, we might glance quickly at another type of plugin, but we'll get started here. So we probably want some buttons to click on, right? That's one of the things. We have a lot of control with typing and stuff, but usually we want nice labeled forms and buttons to click on. So that's where we set up our user form. So if we create a new user form, it kind of fills out the rest of our little box here. If anybody's seen Visual Studio before, you'll probably notice this looks like a very early draft of it. It was a very popular way to get people started programming for a couple decades, but it has gotten way out of hand. It's like 15 gigabyte piece of software now. It slows everything down, and it's kind of lost. It's so big that it's very ineffective to work with. But for a long time, it was a lot more popular. But if you've seen that, this should look familiar for like an earlier version. So we have this little image thing here where we can just drag and drop the controls for our forms, such as a button. So eventually we're going to want to be able to click a button and do something. And there are a couple really important ones over in these properties to look at. The very top one here, name, that's probably the most important part as far as programming. Whenever you put something on the form, if you're going to refer to it in the script, the name there in parentheses is what we call it in the script. So it's essentially, the name is like the variable. That's like put this button in a variable so we can refer to it when we start writing our script. I'm going to use what's called Hungarian notation. And for that, we use a short prefix, 2 to 4 letters, indicating what the thing is, and then some sort of name. I can't really think of a good name quickly, so I'm going to write BTN, just a little prefix to indicate it's a button, and I'll just call it clicker. That's a good name for a button. A couple of lines down below, you'll see this option for caption. Okay, Logan. Yeah, sometimes batteries seem to die. Will die surprisingly. I did that the other day. I thought my laptop was plugged in, but the charger was halfway out, so it wasn't actually charging. It was just sitting there draining the whole time I was working. It caught me by surprise when it shut off. Oh yes, so caption is the words that show on there, so you probably want to change that. Let me try to type that again. I'll just put some words there. That gives us a button we'll be able to click and do some stuff. And I was trying to come up with an example and couldn't really come up with something. So what I was thinking of this morning was just, let's redo that same example we did the other day when I was just made up off the top of my mind when we were looking at Blockly, where we're taking a number from the user and then use a selection structure to say that's not big enough, or loop through a bunch of times. Just a quick look at the syntax here. So to do that, we need a place to get input. So up here, if we click on the form, we have our options for controls, and there's buttons up here that set those. As always, this is an active subject we learn by doing. I'm just kind of trying to point you in that direction so that y'all can spend a little while clicking around on these things and getting familiar with it, because really this is one that no matter which pathway you're heading, the ability to automate some of your functions needed in Microsoft Office, be it Word or Excel or PowerPoint or any of those, is something that will prove very useful with the stuff we studied in this school or this class. So for a place to type, we'll need a text box. So I'll bring in a text box, and this is going to be the number of times that we repeat this process. So we'll just print out some words, 10 times or 7 times, or how many times is our loop going to go for a simple example here. And that is definitely something we're going to need to refer to in the script. So we need to give it a name. So I'm going to go with TXT to indicate it's a text box, and I'll just call it times. And the reason I like to use this type of notation, it's a very, very common standard. It allows us to sort of reuse useful words. So the things that show on the screen get Hungarian notation. So like TXT times is where the user will type in a number, say how many times something's going to happen. And then in the background, we can put that in just a regular variable called times, written with like all lowercase. And then if we need a function that applies directly to that, we can still call it times and use like a capital T on it. And it gives, by typing our variables different like that, it gives us ways to reuse the same useful word and see which part goes with which. So I'll give that call that TXT times, and it's just a place for user to type into. And maybe put a label on there. So I'll come up here, that way the user knows what to put there. So along with text boxes where we enter stuff, we can also just put in labels, which are just arbitrary blocks of text. They don't do anything except show text. Whoops, I didn't mean to double click on that yet. We'll get to this window in a second. Along with typing stuff over here, if we just want to change the words that's on it, you can click once. If you double click, it goes somewhere else. But if it's when it's selected, if you click one time, it'll put your cursor in there so you can change the caption on it. I'll just say something like number of times. That'll work. Gives us a label for where our box is, and you can see we can drag stuff around, put it in different positions, change the layering of it, and basically use our mouse to set up with the little graphical user interface, GUI, which is standard for IT. If we can pronounce it, we go ahead and do. So GUI for graphical user interface is usually pronounced GUI. I think most people are familiar with that word, even outside of the IT field. So we have a little GUI where we can, when we want this common task to happen, we can pop up this GUI and enter a number and click the button, and then a bunch of stuff happens in the document. So we need to write that script. So to write our scripts, once the GUI's together, we'll click on the part we want to script. For example, the button. If I click the button, it opens up this other little thing here, well, a text editor, and we'll see a few keywords. So a private sub is similar to what we saw earlier with submodules. It's BASIC has some old terminology. So computers use linear algebra. They use matrices and tensors. Best to think of it as matrices, and everything inside a computer is a vector. So back in the 1960s, everything had to be done with linear algebra. So they use the terminology from that. So whenever we need a small reusable thing to happen. It's a subspace of our overall vector space that is the program. Around the early 1970s, they kind of had moved the linear algebra entirely into the background. By the mid 1970s, only the electrical engineers still dealt with linear algebra. So as a result of that, the old languages still have some terminology from it, but people use more modern terminology. So instead of a subspace like it originally stood for, people just start referring to that as a submodule. A subspace, if we think of the space of existence of our program, a particular little function is a smaller subset of it, I guess would be another way to refer to that. Just a little piece of our overall space where the program exists. But whichever it is, when we need a function, we have two ways to write them. We have a private sub, which in that case, it has access to all the variables throughout the whole program. That's why a lot of people refer to it as a submodule. It has access to the rest of the program. It's not an entire thing on its own, or we could also create a private function which is a entirely separate thing. Kind of like we saw with the flowcharts. We had the submodules, which were just ways to organize and clean up our flowchart, or the procedures, which are a completely separate thing. And a function, it have that keyword, then some sort of reference name, and then again, you'll probably recognize the parentheses for a standard symbol to do something. So in this case, this is just a function that's going to run when we click that button. So we need some things to happen. Well, the user is going to enter a number on this form. So first thing we should do is probably grab that. Actually, first thing we should do is probably save this, right? We haven't saved it yet, and there is something special we have to do. So I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to go and save this file. In the save as dialog, since we're doing something, we want to change the type and make sure and go with a macro enabled document. So it's not a regular document, it's a document that make sure you save it as a macro enabled document. And then just give it a name. Class example. That seems like a good name. But once it's saved, the save button here accesses the same thing because it's putting it in the file. Now we can start doing some stuff here. Always a good idea to save. I probably should have done that a few moments ago. So another old terminology, all the way back from when linear algebra was at the foreground and programmers had to deal with that. Every program is a vector for anybody who's gone far enough in math to encounter vectors. So there's different dimensions to things. And really that's what a program is. We set up a bunch of dimensions. You're probably familiar with that word for spatial dimensions. And we have like horizontal and vertical dimensions, time dimension, and we separate our measurements out. So internally, that's what a machine is doing, only it's not spatial things, it's the data we have. So whenever we create something in Visual Basic, which is a descendant of Basic, we still use that original word. We need to dimension a variable. But like I said, the linear algebra has been in the background since the 1970s. So most people think of that anymore. They put some modern terms on it. Declare in memory is a very common way people say that anymore, because that uses modern terminology for those symbols. It makes it a lot easier to remember. But whatever it is, we have to use the word dim to say we have a variable to store a place to store things in. I'll call it times, because that's how many times we're going to repeat. And notice here, I wrote it with all lowercase letters to essentially keep the same name as the text box. And this is strictly typed, so we do have to say what type of data it is. So that's going to be an integer. So we're going to dimension a variable, set up some space in memory. Declare in memory is a fairly common way to, a fairly common thing people say with modern terminology for that. Going to call it times, and it will store integer data. And that's a little different than the language we've worked with so far this semester, because we haven't had to worry about type, but it shouldn't take much thinking to realize that machines are going to run a whole lot faster if the computer doesn't have to figure out what type of data it has. If the programmer knows what type of data is going to be there, we can go ahead and say it to begin with, and then that will tremendously increase our speed. That's probably good for a variable. That's how we set up a variable, and then we need to put something in it. So now that we have that, we can assign it whatever's typed in that text box. So over in the GUI, create this text box and call it txt times. So we can refer to that right here in the code. Txt times. Then when we push dot, you'll see a bunch of little options pop up. All the predictive text stuff. So there's a lot of that. That helps to learn about it. But all the things about that text box are here. In particular, the one we want is the text. Whoops. Times dot. And if I start typing text, whenever it shows up on the list, can just select it from the list. It's always better to let the computer do the typing. Computers never make typos. That's a human trait. So that'll get whatever is typed in there and put it in here. But this is a sort of like a common problem we saw in Raptor. The things coming from the keyboard, like what gets typed into a text box, that's a string. That's just our character data. So we need to convert that. So to convert things, cint is abbreviation for convert to integer. And all of our stuff looks like this. So like cint, cstr for string, cfloat, cdouble, that's double precision floating point number, 64-bit number instead of a 32-bit. All of our different data types, we can convert them, but it kind of looks like that. So convert to integer is cint, which should hopefully give you a good strong hint of what the other conversion things look like. Int and string str are abbreviated, and pretty much everything else is spelled out with a capital C in front. So I'll take whatever's typed in that text box, turn it into an integer, and put it in this variable. So logically, that's the sort of thing we've seen, just a different syntax for it. Then once we get that far, then we can do some stuff with it, like check how many times it happened. So quickly look at our syntax for this. So a keyword if, it should look familiar. I'll say times is less than 3. Then we need the keyword then. And when I hit enter, notice that a couple of them change colors. Should look a whole lot like the Python syntax, except that the colon has been replaced with the word then. And we'll come down a couple lines and write the keywords end if to show where that selection structure ends.
What about elif?
It's spelled out.
Oh, it's spelled out.
Else if times is greater than 8, then do something else. Oh, well, I have to do the other thing first. I'll come to this in a moment. A little tick mark is your comment. I was expecting it to turn green. Usually comment, oh, there it goes. The little, an apostrophe. As I said, tick mark. Tick mark usually refers to the grave accent, the thing over there by the number 1 key underneath the tilde. Just an apostrophe is, or single quote mark is your comment symbol here. Oh, which is one big important thing to, so obviously since a single quote mark gives us a comment, double quote marks and single quote marks are not interchangeable in this language. A couple things. I'll show a message box. That's useful. So MSG box, so message box. So if less than 3, it's like that's not very much repeating. We'll just throw up a message box that says enter more stuff. So like we've seen before, lots of pre-built things built into the syntax that we can ask for. Message box gives a prompt, and then there will be an OK button already built into the message box. That's a useful thing to have in there. And then our prompt is just going to be a string. So like, that's not enough. Oh, maybe I should show you concatenation. That's not enough. Concatenation is going to be an ampersand. So to put 2 strings together, we would need an ampersand. Please enter a bigger number. And now I should be able to get that else then. What? Is it 1 word? Times is bigger than 8. And oh, so like that, Keegan. I was trying to type it in 2 words. I've been typing in doing lots of C# stuff lately.
Yeah.
So it's spelled out, but the words are jammed together.
Okay.
So if it's smaller than 3, that's not enough. If it's bigger than 8, well, maybe 12, just have something there. I'll pop up another message box that says that's too big. That's too many. And enter a smaller number. White space does not matter here. So any indenting or things like that are solely for your benefit, make it easier to read the code. You don't have to worry about white space, but that's the basic appearance of our selection structure. And as now maybe a loop be an easy thing. I'll use a while loop. We've looked at those. So again, the keyword while, while times is greater than 0. And we come down a couple lines and type the keyword when for while end. So notice we're using keywords to indicate where our things start and stop. And there's a lot of keywords instead of arbitrary symbols. That's one thing a lot of people like about BASIC is we use keywords, not arbitrary symbols that mean things. So it's a lot easier for a human to remember. Then we can just print some stuff in our document. So for a quick example here, I'll just put some stuff here. So like this macro has to be attached to a document. So we can always refer to that immediately by saying active document. And then we use the dot operator to access all the different things about that. for our example here, I'm just going to insert some text. So if I start typing insert, oh, whoops, that's something else. Before doing that, I have to go to the active document and access the content. Almost forgot that one. So the words written into our Word document. And in those words, then we can use the dot operator to access things about those words, such as insert. Insert after, we'll just go to the end of the thing. Insert alignment tab, auto text before or break. Insert date time. Somebody mentioned that earlier. Is a useful thing to be able to automatically insert into your thing, because yeah, you might have to date all your reports, insert a whole paragraph, insert afterwards. You can see there's lots of ways to insert stuff. I'm just going to go with insert after, which is the end of the document. We'll just append some stuff on the end, and then what do we want to append? Just a random string. I'll just write doing stuff however many times. And then we don't want to forget to, oops, +1, -1. We don't want to forget to decrement our counter, because if we enter an infinite loop and get stuck, then that's in Microsoft Word. So we have to crash Microsoft Word and restart the whole program. But a lot of that, the logic should look familiar, right? That's what we've been studying in this class. And the big change here, and what will make this so incredibly useful, is where this particular thing runs at. Because if I come up here and hit the little green button, or in the menu, there's options to run it as well. Oh, and there's debuggers built right in, so you have tools to help track down problems when things go wrong. Is my screen still showing? Yeah, okay. It just popped up the window asking which screen I wanted to share. I was like, that's weird. Y'all can still see my screen, can't you?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
I don't know. Okay. Yeah.
Zoom was just acting strange. Software that happens as software gets more and more complicated. There's more and more places where little glitches or bugs can work in. So we have tools to help us track those down if need be. Oh, that's apparently if you open the try to open the debugging tools on a Zoom call, it will activate the screen share on your Zoom call. That seems like it might be a bug somewhere, right? So it's not even our own software. Sometimes it's the interaction with other software that causes bugs.
So when that's ironic, you activated the debug tab and then, it's a bug on your computer.
Well, it's not on my computer. And after class, I'm going to report that to both Microsoft and Zoom, because that's something that could happen. It's like, I was showing a intro programming class, the VBA macros, and hitting the debug thing activates a feature on Zoom. Somebody might want to look into that. But a good tip as you all move forward, that it's not just our software that we're debugging, right? As things get bigger and more complicated, sometimes it's like that. It's the interaction with other software might be the bug. Those are a lot harder to test for, because we'd have to test every possible interaction to find it. I'll report those after class. But when I hit the green button, it jumps back over here, and there's that little dialog box we made.
Yeah, that's ironic. It's funny when you activated the debug, a thing happened where try to debug your Zoom.
Yeah,
That's funny.
I think I know what's causing that because of doing this for many years. But I'll just pass on the word to the people that debug both of those pieces of software, because that's not going to be a fun one for them to debug. But we have this. So if I say 2, Click the button. It's not enough. We need a bigger number. So let's try 23. That's a bigger number. Oh, that's too many times. So our selection structure seems to be working. Something in the middle, like 8 times. We click that. Oh, get a whole bunch of lines saying doing stuff. Could probably split those up into separate lines. But anyways, afterwards, close that. Oh, that's a good place to show concatenation. That quick example I thought of earlier didn't quite seem to cut it. So concatenation is an ampersand, which makes a lot of sense, right? Because that symbol means and. So when we concatenate things, we want this string and I'll do VBCR. That's Visual Basic Carriage Return. That's pushing the enter key. So I'm going to concatenate on, hit the enter key. That way things show up on different lines. And then the normal debugging process, save all those changes, run it again. Let's say enter the 6. There we go. And that way, that time it showed it on different lines. That kind of works. Close that. Make sure everything's saved here. But that worked from running it here. But if I close out of here, temporary words, I'll just put something here and save this. So now what I want to do is close this and come back into it. So here's the recent one. Notice the file extension type there in the hover text. It's not a .docx like you're used to, it's a docm. So make sure you save stuff as macro enabled files. And which is a security warning, right? The user has to be made, a lot of you are heading towards security. It's very important to let the user know something's about to run. If you don't want things to automatically happen and catch the user by surprise. So little messages like that go a long ways because in a lot of aspects, there's only so much we can do, right? So having something, messages go a long ways, even if the message is kind of not helpful in many situations. Just having that message has a mental impact on the user. So once again, I'll push Alt F11 and the macro is still there and still run it from here. It'd be nice to have it run from someplace else. One useful one is, well, whenever we open it. So if I come over here, notice on this tab, whoops, over here, showing everything in the project, and there's the document that we're working on, the thing our macro is connected to. Here's the form we created. If we click on this document, we'll get another place where we can write scripts and we can make little submodules. One that can be useful, whoops. The keyboard on my office computer is just different enough from my regular computer that I keep putting my hand in the wrong spot. The keys are just like slightly narrower. So it
happens every time I go back to work.
Yeah,
Keyboards.
It throws me off because in my office, I plug in a keyboard that has the same shape as my regular laptop. So it feels like I'm typing on the same keyboard all the time. And then whenever I use the office laptop computer, it just throws me off. So we can also, once again, create a private submodule. That's what most people say anymore, because we don't use the linear algebra terms in programming. So a little private submodule, and there's some pre-built ones we can use, such as document open. It'll go ahead and throw in those keywords for the end of it. And in between, what we can ask for our form to open automatically. User form 1.show. In Visual Basic, the parentheses are implied. So in Python, we always had to put the parentheses if we wanted that to actually run. Here we could go either way. We could say .show and type parentheses or leave them off. If you have arguments that you need to pass in for that function to carry out what it does, you definitely have to have the parentheses. But if you do not have any arguments to pass in, the parentheses are optional when we call it. So document open is a pre-built thing that it will recognize. And then user form 1, that's the name of our form. We can see the name of it right here. Or the name attribute down here in this properties list, the one in parentheses, that's how we refer to things in our script. And I forgot to change it, so ours is still just called user form 1. So if you do, you really should change that every time. That way it's very clear what you're referring to. But whatever's typed here is how we refer to that in our code. So this is just saying as soon as this document opens, go ahead and show this form. So now if I close this and come back into Word, this one can be especially useful maybe on your way through school, because every time you go to write essays, you probably have some formatting requirements, right? Write an essay in MLA format or write an essay in APA format or something like that. So you could set up some of that basic formatting, like your, go ahead and set up a little box that automatically inserts the MLA header. Those 4 lines at the top left, it's got your name, the class, the professor's name and the date. And all you really need to ask for, have a little input to type in the which class it is, or maybe some check boxes or something. If you already pre-programmed in your classes for each semester, then start that with everything. And if you're writing an essay, click that in an insert button, and then you get your MLA header and maybe page numbers and all that stuff automatically. The repetitive task, or for maybe in a company situation, a business situation, there's a certain, almost like you can set up your document like company stationery, so that you would have like a specific watermark and a logo placed on there, and have that have a little thing open automatically whenever you go to do stuff. Every time you open a new document, you can, if it needs that stuff, that watermark and very particular formatting, go ahead and hit that button. And then in one click, you have all that formatting sitting there. The colors are put in and the correct font is chosen and all of that stuff. Just at one click instead of a whole bunch of clicks. So it should still work the same. We say 2 and click the button. It's too small of a number, need something bigger. So maybe 16 is too big to show that else if. So that was a great question, because that wasn't in my original example, Keegan. And that is an important one. We want if, else in our example. And then somewhere in the middle, like 6 times, should print out those words. Just in this case, a very trivial example. So hopefully whatever your box is going to be, whatever your GUI
What
is.
if the number is less than 3?
Less than 3, that was, it said it's not big enough. So if I said 1, we get this little, this is what message box brings up.
Right.
So you can put up a message and you automatically get that OK button. those are very, very useful. So that works. And well, we saw that automatically starting it, and then we can, yeah, that on open is great for formatting, especially like essentially what the equivalent of company stationery, where not all of your documents are going to need it, but enough of them are that it would be nice to have it in one click instead of a whole bunch of clicks. Or on your way through school, MLA or APA formatting, and some of those repetitive tasks that you might want to do over and over again. So once again, Alt F11, it'd be really nice if we had a button, a normal Microsoft Word button, right? That's how people are used to working with Microsoft Word. Because maybe we don't want it to happen at the beginning. Maybe it's just something that's going to happen along the way. Then it'd be nice to have it up here. So really that's what this stuff is today about, is making your own button for Microsoft Word. So to put it up here, we do have to actually attach it to a macro. So I'm going to go over to the View tab, and under Macros, oops. You may have encountered record macros before. That's the general automated process. You hit record and then you move your mouse around and type on the keyboard, and it just keeps track of all of those. So whenever you replay that macro, it just does those same movements and types the same thing on the keyboard in a split second instead of at human speeds. It just records all the key presses and button clicks. Right above that is View Macros, where we have a list of things, and we can create a new one. So I give it a name. I'll call it Do Stuff, because our example is trivial. I can't even think of a, it was just to look at some basic syntax. So it's not even enough to really give it anything. And you'll notice whenever I did that, when I hit create, it jumped over to that screen that we get when we push Alt F11. And over here, oh, there it is. So now we have a third part. So we have references. So these are the references in our that macro we just created. Here's our user form, that's still in here. If we click on that, we'll look at the form. And if we double click on something, I'll click on the text box this time. We don't necessarily have to put anything here, but notice it created another private sub for when that text box changes. Anytime that text, anytime the text in that box changes, we can set up a function to run, have something happen. So once you put things in the form, just double click them to get over and write the code for it. So we still have that, and in references, oh, where'd it go? Somewhere in the windows, there it is. When I said create a new macro, it created a sub, another sub, only you'll notice this one doesn't have the keyword private. This is public, and by public, it's not referring to people, it's referring to other software. So our macro over with the user form, it's private. Other software can't access this code. Only that button we assign this to can access that code. It's all private to that button. But this one's not private. It's publicly accessible, so other things like the rest of Microsoft Word can access this.
Huh.
So if I put some things here, well, really, all we need to do here is what we just saw in that open method. Our user form, I forgot to rename it, which it's really good form to always rename those. But whatever name it has, we just refer to the name of the form itself. If you're not sure what the name is, you can go click on it over here and see it pop up in the properties box. The text, the button, the number of times, or just the form. And these properties, there's things like the label that goes up here, the size of it. We learned a lot more by doing, so I'm just pointing you all in this direction. You'll want to play around with these things. So user form 1 dot show once again. And now this macro just brings up that, will bring up that form we put together. So I'll hit save. And I'll go ahead and close out the macro thing. Because now we need to put this on our ribbon somewhere. Well, I already have a new tab here from getting ready this morning. If you weren't aware of it, our ribbon is fully customizable. So if you go to File and Options, there's a button for customizing the ribbon. So File, Options, and then you can customize that ribbon. And if you're on LibreOffice, it's I think under Edit and Preferences, there's a place to configure the toolbars. The button was clearly labeled. It's been a couple months since I last did that in LibreOffice there. But, or whichever one, right? If you're on Google Docs or on Pages, doing things in AppleScript, whichever one you're creating your plugin for, you will have a place to add a button to it. So let's create it. And over on this right-hand side, we can create new tabs, make new tabs, delete old ones. I'm gonna create a new tab. I think it was this one, which call it in class.
In LibreOffice, it was a view toolbar under customized.
Okay, yes. It was, I
there.
remember it was clearly labeled, but it's been a couple months since I last did it, and I think that was as far as I got. Like, okay, yeah. Once I found it, it's like, okay, that's clearly
The only thing
labeled.
that keeps me off is the bibliographies. I use it. I write everything in LibreOffice, and then I go like to Docs or to Word online, and then I make the bibliography with their resources.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's a lot. That's another useful one.
Word's is such a good. Yeah, I should add that plugin to.
If anybody has me for a 200 level programming class, I will make you. I have you make one of those. There's like a tedious essay assignment, but you have to make a document. You have to make a bibliography generator. And
that doesn't sound too bad. It sounds like a fun way to.
Oh yeah, the essay assignments. People sigh at first, but then I get lots of those comments. It's like, that was a lot of fun. Because instead of using the buttons in Microsoft Word, if you're taking a programming class, you need to learn how to
make the button myself.
Buttons.
Yeah. Exactly. I'll do it myself. That's
which
the way
is
to do it.
One definition I've heard of programmers are the people that tell a computer what to do. That's a very loose definition. Right? Instead of working with the software, we're the ones telling it what to do. And that's what we're doing here is a great example of that. Right? We basically made a new button. So we're telling Microsoft Word we want to see our button. So once we get our new tab set up, you can select that. Over here, we can see all the commands available in Microsoft Word, which is another thing a lot of people don't realize is that there's more than the buttons we see. They only turned on the most popular ones. Or if you have trouble finding buttons, a really useful trick is to make your own tab where you put the buttons that you use a lot. And that way you don't have to go looking for them every time. So there's a lot more things there. Or we have an option for macros, which is what we just created. So in macros, we have this one macro available. So select it on the left. Make sure the correct tab is selected on the right, and then hit that add button. Oh, needs to create a group. Oh, whoops. So in that tab, choose which group it goes in. The groups are like these placements here. So on these little vertical bars, we have like here on the home tab, the clipboard group, the font group, the paragraph group. We do have to put our buttons in one of the groups. Once that's selected, just hit the add button. Where did I do that other one? Oh. That was the one from getting ready this morning. We don't need that on here. So just hit the add button and it should put it in the group. I'm not sure why mine doubled up there. That was kind of strange. Then we hit OK. You'll see we have this new tab here. And then that is a button to refer to our thing. And we have control over those names. We're programmers. We tell the computer what to do. And we click that. Uh-oh. Did I get a typo in there? Let me double check my example from this morning. User form 1.show. I don't see a typo, so I'm just going to try retyping this line. Stop the run. So Alt F11 gets us over here. Okay, I'm not sure why that's not working. I'm going to delete that and go through those steps again. So I'll delete that tab and make a new one. Oh, zoom buttons are in the way. Put that down there. So under view, go to the view tab and under macros, create a view our macros. So delete that one. And I'll make a new one. Oh, I think I wanted this one. That's why. Okay, so what was going on is when I did the example this morning, I didn't name the thing there either. So it was looking at all active templates or all documents, and I didn't rename the user form there either. So there were two things called user form 1. A good reason to
conflict.
Yeah, name things every time, right? That's like using you don't want to use the default variable names. Give it a meaningful name. So I'm going to switch and look at just this document. Let's see if we can find it now. So then I want to call user form 1. Oh, so now it's trying to predict things, so it's not confused. The debugging process, that's consistent wherever we're at. So I'll do that and save that. So now go back over here to options and customize the ribbon. So there was this one. Is there a delete button? Oh. I'm going to uncheck that last one so I don't get confused. And I'll make a new tab called I'll just call
Yeah,
it.
I don't think you can delete a tab.
Yeah, they're there. Once you create a tab, it's there. There's no way to get rid of them without resetting all of them. You can reset it back to like the way it came from Microsoft Office, but once you create a tab, the best you can do is just hit the check mark to undo that tab. So most people just go with rename. If they want to delete one, they take all the stuff out of it, give it a different name, and put different things in it. So I'm going to make another one here, example 2. I'll choose the first group, that default group in there, maybe rename the group. You can give it a logo, some sort of symbol, different pictures. I'll just call it doing stuff because our example is so trivial to just look at syntax that it is not even a good name to put on it. Go to macros, select this and add that to the group. That must have been why it tried to add 2 things earlier, because there was another document that has something called user form 1. So it might have been good to see that error, because that's an easy one to overlook. Now we have this example, and if I click this, there we go, worked that time. So basically a way to write our own custom button. So if we enter 2, click the button, hit that selection structure so it's not big enough. Enter 55. It's way too many. Not going to work that hard, but somewhere in the middle, like say 5. It prints out those words, or really. Hopefully you all can come up with some examples of much more useful things than printing the words doing stuff on the document. But that was what I wanted to look at to kind of wrap things up for this semester, because it's a great application of what we've studied in this class. So yeah, I'll send you the notes that I did right beforehand. They're slightly different. They're very simple. I think they're basically the same thing. But in Microsoft, any of the Microsoft Office things, so just push Alt F11 and you can create new forms, little GUIs to put in things, or just a module if you don't need the GUI with it and you just want some code to run, that would be a module. So either a graphical user interface to enter with some inputs and buttons, or just some code that runs in the background. You can look through here, you can see as you hover over stuff, it tells you what all the stuff is. A combo box is a drop-down box. Everybody in the world except the people that except for programmers call them drop-down boxes, but where we have, it looks like a text box, and when you click the arrow, a big menu drops down below. It's very useful with arrays. So in any of your Microsoft Office stuff, you can hit those. Then you can choose the document and set it to happen on a new document or when the document opens, different options there, or attach it to a macro, and then you can put that macro into your tool ribbon somewhere, and then you've basically created your own button in Microsoft Word in our case, but all of them have this. So if I go in PowerPoint, and when you're in there, just push Alt F11 and you have the same same capabilities here in PowerPoint or Excel. And most of you, if you go Googling or some things about this, most of your stuff is going to be pointing towards Excel because that's where we tend to do a lot more math and where programming sort of things are going to show up more often. We have it in all of our Office stuff, really, really useful. And the language is called VBA. So whenever you need to look for something, like we looked at some variables, we have to dimension our variable, or in our modern world, most people would just say declare in memory for those letters for that keyword. We set up our variables. We looked at a selection structure, a loop. We didn't really see arrays, so that might be something to look for. We can say arrays in VBA. And guys, you move forward and you go look stuff up, make sure you're specific about which language you're looking at. And always look at official documentation first. Tutorials will get out of date. It was really nice in the fall because all the Python tutorials went out of date in over like a 3-week span of time with the release of 3.10. So tutorials and forums will go out of date, but official documentation will always stay up to date. So always check that. Always check official documentation first. The thing about that though is the people who are really, really, really good at writing programs, so much so that they're the ones making the language, they're not always the best at writing paragraphs. So the official documentation is often kind of cryptic and maybe hard to follow, but always look at this first. And then it's like, okay, this doesn't make sense. Then go back and check some of the like regular tutorials on it, which are by design easy to follow. And don't just use the tutorial for that one feature. Use that tutorial to learn how to read the official documentation, because this is the always up-to-date official reference material. But sometimes we have to look at tutorials to figure out what they're saying in these things. And once you get used to the style that they wrote their documentation in, that gets a little bit easier. But for most stuff, just put it right in Google. Make sure you say in VBA, and that'll give you those instructions. And hopefully that will provide an immensely useful place to apply the skills we've been studying in this class automatically. And for those who like the diagram, the visual representation, I did point out earlier that Raptor exports VBA code. So you can do your flow chart and then export the code and copy and paste that right in there. And make your own buttons for Microsoft Office as a very useful thing to do. Oh, whoops. Stop this screen share. So real quick, I did write down those steps we went over. My example from earlier this morning was a little different. It's basically the same thing. Just kind of the steps there. So I'm going to put this in the chat room. Oh, wait, I have to download it to put it in the chat room, don't I? Download this. And so a little bit different, but it's still basically the same thing. Did you all see that file come in to the chat room?
I do believe so. Yep, I see it.
Okay. The other day I tried to upload something and it did not go into the chat room, and it didn't give me any messages or anything. That's left me worried. It's like, I don't know what happened the other day, but hopefully that's fixed.
I tried to go back and look at some of the files in the chat room on the recordings. I don't think I was able to do that. Is there a special way to do that?
I'm not sure.
I'll recheck it because I was trying to look at the way you did time in Raptor again, just to refresh myself on that. I know the time, but I just wanted to see the thing. But I'll try it again and I'll email you.
I will look I will see if I can find it and email it to you.
All right, I
I
appreciate.
know I deleted the original copy already, but maybe
Yeah.
I'll see if I can get that, or after we wrap up here,
Just helps me with the syntax.
we can check real quick. But yeah, I thought that would be a very useful way to kind of wrap up the semester here. So it's 2:23. Our class is scheduled till 4:50, and then that kind of wraps up the semester. So I say, please use our time productively. As always, I will be sitting here until 4:50, ready to answer any questions. Because here at the end of the semester, you might still have some final project stuff to do. You might want to mess around with that, because I think we just looked at we looked at that last, because I think that will be one of the most useful applications of what we studied in here for those who aren't directly going into a programming field, just to add those little scripts to other software. And most pieces of software have places to add plugins to. So you can apply that stuff that we've learned here as an expansion and customization on other software that you're using, even if you're not programming directly. But that was about all I had on tap for today, because I wanted to make sure there's lots and lots of time when you all already had a block on your schedule that said SDEV 120 stuff. Please use our time productively to finish up projects and apply stuff. It's an active subject. We learn by doing, learn so much more by clicking our mouse around and typing than from listening to me to do it. So hopefully that got you pointed in a good direction to get started. And yeah, if you need questions, I just mentioned 4:50, but you all have my contact information. If you have questions later, it doesn't have to be this semester. I'm always happy to help when I can. So feel free to send questions. Any questions you have. I even have some students that have already graduated and moved into the working field, and periodically they'll get stuck somewhere, a complicated problem that's there's no tutorials or anything about, and if they're completely stuck, they'll still reach out to me. So I'm always happy to answer questions, keep my contact information around. Otherwise, does anybody have any questions for today?
No, thanks for the semester.
All right.
Thank you.
You all have a great summer. If you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you. I do have one. So sorry, the noise is in the back, but I do have a question, and that is, could you just send me the information on the login for just like, so I could try to get in today, maybe?